So in my previous video, I took a look at a game called Lenestra, which was recommended to me by someone in my Discord DMs. The reason they wanted me to play it was that they said that it was significantly better, or at the very least the combat was significantly better than a game called Dungeon Quest. Now, I've never played Dungeon Quest, so in that video, I decided that the next video I was going to do would be talking about Dungeon Quest. After playing Lenestra and talking about the colossal amount of problems that it has, I basically came to the conclusion that there is no way that Dungeon Quest can be worse than Lenestra. Well, was I right? Sort of. Dungeon Quest is a simple game, an extremely simple game. So much so that it completely lacks a tutorial, and despite that, there's literally no reason for one. This is one of those rare occasions where I have no complaints about there not being a tutorial, because what the hell would they even talk about? Attack enemies, raise stat, do damage. Yeah, great. We really needed a tutorial for that. No, we don't. We don't have one, so I got nothing here. Now, as for the game itself, well, I just told you. It's attack enemies, raise stat, do damage. That's pretty much it. But let's be more precise, shall we? We want to talk about whether or not the combat is better or worse than Lenestra. And the reason that that's a difficult question to answer is because Dungeon Quest's combat barely even classifies as combat. While Lenestra's combat was horribly executed, but still a system nonetheless, Dungeon Quest's combat is basically just not combat at all. Your options for combat in Dungeon Quest are M1 to attack, Q to use ability 1, E to use ability 2, WASD to move, I guess. And that's it. That's literally the whole game is WASD, click QE, wrap it up, we're done, go home. So that begs the question, is that better than Lenestra? I don't know. I can't make up my mind, man. Is barely having a system better than having a terrible system? I guess that's up to you. I can't make that decision. Now, obviously, the consequence of combat being extremely simplistic is that it's also extremely boring. To put it bluntly, Dungeon Quest is just a boring game, and I can't possibly recommend you play it. I'm gonna continue talking about it, but I want to get it out of the way right away. There is no reason for you to go play this game, and I do not recommend it. Because of how just completely bare bones the systems here are, you're literally just going to be playing the same levels over and over and over again, eventually getting to a point where you kill the enemies in 1 to 2 hits, there's zero challenge whatsoever, you're basically never going to die, and a lot of the time, because the bosses can be such bullet sponges, I would just sit underneath the boss taking hit after hit after hit and not caring because, well, it wasn't gonna kill me. Of course, I say this because, unsurprisingly, Dungeon Quest is another one of those level lock games. Yeah, the progression in this game is going from one level lock to another level lock with a sprinkling of RNG in there. It's not great. And by not great, I mean it's horrendous. It's really, really fucking bad. See, the fact of the matter is that the majority of the progression in this game is completely RNG. See, there's 3 stats in the game that you need to worry about. Your health, your melee attack damage, and your spell power. Your health does exactly what you would think it does. As for the melee damage, that increases the damage of melee weapons, as well as increasing the damage of skills that scale off of melee damage. And then spell power is obviously the opposite of that. Any weapons that scale off of spell power increase the damage with your spell power, and spells that scale off of spell power, you get the idea. Now, here's the problem. The way that you get items in this game is one of 2 ways. Number 1, you're wandering through the level and a boss randomly shows up. This guy, Greg, is effectively a loot pinata. You do his not at all difficult boss fight, and when you kill him, he drops some loot. Brilliant. Him showing up, as I said, completely random. The other way is to complete a level itself. When you get to the end of the level, you'll get 2 item drops guaranteed every single time, with the ability to pay for more item drops. Go figure. Now, the problem is that there's no way to manipulate the RNG, as far as I understand, to get items that you're actually looking for. That means that if you're playing through a level and you get to the end of it, there's a very decent chance that you'll get items that are either worse than what you have or for a stat that you don't need. Thankfully, while I was playing, I got relatively lucky with a lot of the items that I pulled, but I had the understanding that if I hadn't gotten lucky in a lot of these places, I would have been running up against walls because, well, there wouldn't have been anything I could do. I would be completely reliant on the game randomly handing out a piece of gear that was up to my level in the place that I needed it to be. So if I rolled items that were based around spell power, and I'm not using spell power, then those are just over-glorified paperweights that don't help me. Never mind getting weapons that are just worse than what I already have. Now, you can level up your stats via just leveling up your characters, but the difference between your leveling up stats and the stats on weapon and gear that you equip is astronomical. So basically, what I'm saying is exactly what I said earlier. The progression in this game is strictly linked to RNG, which, as I'm sure you can guess, is not very good design. As for me, like I said, the game was pretty much a cakewalk the entire way through. I died once all the way at the end, which is basically what I decided was I was going to play until I died. And I got so bored, I just didn't bother dodging an attack, and it killed me in one hit, and that's the only way I died. The reason I never died? Well, very early on, I got a healing spell that was on a cooldown of 15 seconds. This healing spell, from the beginning of the game to the end of the game, healed me 100% of all of my health. Now, mind you, I am not running a spell power build. This is a strictly melee-focused build, and despite that, the healing spell on a 15-second cooldown fully heals me no matter what. Not sure what the balancing there is. So I would always have the healing spell equipped, as well as a ground slam ability, which scaled off of my melee damage power, which would do a shitload of damage. Later on, I would get some, like, air slice, arcane slice, blade beam kind of moves, I don't know. But these ended up replacing the ground slam as my new way of DPS. And really, what it just ended up coming down to was rounding up enemies, hitting them with the skill, rounding up enemies, hitting them with the skill, healing if I ever got hit because I was too lazy to avoid attacks. And like, I don't know, man, it's barely a game. Sure, you can upgrade your stuff if you want to. You can try to farm for specific things, but there's not really any reason to go back to any levels you've already cleared because, as is the standard problem with these types of very linear progression, dungeon-based, loot-based games, there's no reason to go back because the way it's balanced is that you unlocked easy mode for Dungeon 1, medium mode for Dungeon 1, hard mode for Dungeon 1, and then Dungeon 2. Now, why they don't unlock easy mode for Dungeon 1, easy mode for Dungeon 2, easy mode for Dungeon 3, and then dole out the medium and hard modes for those previous dungeons so you have a reason to go back to them later, I have absolutely no idea. Not that it would really make much of a difference anyway, because the difference between difficulty easy and difficulty hard is we've bumped up the stats. And that's it. Actually, that's disingenuous. Sometimes they add more enemies with different movesets. So I suppose they get a pass there. So really, at the end of the day, Dungeon Quest is alright, I guess. It's not egregiously terrible, and its mechanics don't make me want to throw myself out the window, but there's no way in hell that I would ever boot this up or ever recommend it to anyone because, well, like I said, it's just boring. The AI isn't interesting, the loot isn't that interesting, it's not fun to play, and if you were going to go play with a friend, if they're not at the exact same level than you, well, I can't even begin to imagine trying to play this. If they're over-leveled than you and playing with you on a lower level thing, they'll just one-hit every enemy, and that's not fun. And I assume if you want to play with your higher level friend, you won't be able to queue into those higher level dungeons, and even if you could, it wouldn't matter, because you would just be poking them with a toothpick, and then they would walk over with a fucking jet hammer and just beat your skull into the ground. So yeah, I suppose that's that. I don't really have much else to say with Dungeon Quest. Unlike the previous review, it didn't make me extremely frustrated because, well, the game functions, it works, it's just not fun. With that though, I'm done here. So if you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe. If you didn't, don't. And with all that being said, have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you guys next time.